Yes, Bafundi. So right now I'm going to carry on the shirt. We've now done the first fitting in the calico, the second fitting in this fabric just joined by hand, and now I'm doing the final. So let's just look through the pieces quickly. Here's the back. So here everything was fine. I do join the shoulder by machine, but for this chap, I'll show you on the mannequin later, the the back of the neck was too far down. So actually shortening the shoulder to bring the back of the neck up, and then obviously we have to drop on the front, same. The one thing I did here on the dart, because it's quite a big dart, has a bit of a hollow back, is I stretched out as much as I could that maximum of the dart. You can see it's not a lot, but there is a bit of a stretch there. On cotton, it's not as easy to do as wool. Just stretch that out so that the dart can just lay there quite nicely. And then I did, yeah, as I said, shorten the shoulders a little bit. Otherwise, the back is actually totally fash. Front is also good. I will have to drop this down because now I've shortened the back. So I have to drop this down. I don't want to get too close to this first button. This usually I do 7 centimeters from the raw edge for the first button. Looks like I'm going to come down about 3 centimeters, which will put this button very close. So I might actually also move this seam allowance a little bit higher, just so I don't have to cut so much off on here. And I will then be putting my last button on here. Usually this last button I don't do for the fitting, just in case we have to shorten this. So we can do that now quickly. This last button, near the top of each button, is 7 centimeters. What am I saying? Is 9 centimeters apart. And the button is about half a centimeter down from the top. So if you think about this one, it's going to be 9 centimeters and then half a centimeter for the button, because the button is not exactly there on the top of this buttonhole. So I measure 9.5 from the top, 1.5 from the side of the garment. And this one is now a horizontal buttonhole. 1.5 usually ends kind of exactly on the stitch line that I've got here on the edge of the fold under. And just for reasons of fashion, this we're doing in a white, because we're actually going to do some just white detailing on here, like the collar and cuffs are going to be white. And then the button obviously will be on that side. And this then should be exactly 9 centimeters from that button. And we can always just check that I haven't done anything funny with my measurements. You see there, the buttons are all sitting just about half a centimeter from the top of the buttonhole, and those two must match exactly. So that's perfect. I'll put those buttonholes on, or I'll put the buttonhole in the button. Here for the placket, I did stitch this for the second fitting, final fitting, whatever you want to say, but I just wasn't happy with the stitch quality. So, for the fitting, I just carried on. I just fitted it, knowing that afterwards I'm going to just unpick a little bit and redo. So I'm going to redo the placket, put that buttonhole, and then I'll be joining this sleeve after the shoulder. And looking at the pattern, I am going to be, see the one challenge we have is if I move this down with the shoulder seam, 1 centimeter seam allowance, then this shoulder or this armhole goes down, and then I also have to recalculate what I'm doing here, because this is still on a 2 centimeter seam allowance. So maybe I just do 2 centimeters and just bring this further down. Let me just look at the pattern piece quickly. So there it is. There's my 2 centimeter seam allowance. So we have a 1 centimeter. That's actually not so bad. Yeah, and then I'll stitch there. Yeah, not, what is that? 5 centimeters. Yeah, I'm sure it's going to be fine. It's going to be easier for my maths. So I'll probably just stitch the shoulder seams at 2 centimeters as usual. Last thing I forgot to mention here on the front, here I'll be putting a small dart. This is just going to give a bit of shape for the chest. Also, guys, you have a big stomach here. This tends to gape quite a bit. So I often put a small dart here, or depending on the style, I turn that into almost like a princess seam here. And I just split that and then create a dart here, and I also take a little bit out of there just so that we can kind of like hug the stomach a little bit. This guy, he's not, doesn't have such a big stomach. He's just like quite a bulky chap. So that is just going to bring it a little bit, give him a little bit of a nicer shape around the chest. And I just want to mark that on the packing piece. Let's see. Well, that does correspond. Okay, so I just want to mark that out. This should be 1.5 Yebo, and this whole thing is 1 centimeter. So yeah, I mean, I'll measure that all out in a moment. Right now, I'm just going to start with the buttons and buttonholes, and then I'll finish off. But again, I always have to think about the up and down, because going to the machine, coming back, going to the iron, coming back. This it's all, I do get my steps in for the day, but it does cost time. So I'll stitch that at the domestic machine. Then one time do these plackets, these darts, and the shoulder at the industrial. So I'm not up and down so much. So that is what I'll go and do at this time. So before I go and do this dart, I thought I'll just show you here what that's looking like. You can see I'm measuring here on the seam allowance, 1.5 seam allowance from there. This is 1 centimeter, half centimeter each side, 2 centimeters deep, so there's my dart. And now this portion at the end of the day is going to tuck back in this direction. So we really can't, just keep the legs of the dart going out there. It's going to make it too tight to fold back here. So you have to then come back to a point so it's easy to flip this over. So I'm going to do that, so there we've got our placket redone. You see it's lying flat here. Before, the stitching was not great here, it was too tight there, so it ended up kind of curving around like this, which is just not fashion. So now it's nice and flat, nice and fabulous. So here, for the fitting, it was 2 centimeters seam allowance. Let me just find what I did with my pins. Story of my life, searching for pins. So I've got a separate video on the plaquettes. I'll link that to this video in the description. But at the end of the day, I always stitch my plaquettes a little bit longer than the sleeve itself, so that I can afterwards go ahead and cut that gouache very easily. Now here for the fitting, it was a 2 centimeter seam allowance, just for in case. And so I want the buttonhole, or I want the button to be here at 7. Meaning I need 175, I mean 3/4 each side to give me 1.5 centimeters of a buttonhole. And obviously I want that to be in the middle. So this is going to be my buttonhole. This button I put right in the middle of the buttonhole. I worry about it being too up or too down. And yeah, usually around yeah around 8 is the bottom of the buttonhole. So I can just transfer that easily onto the other side. Nothing too exciting there. On the front, you see there I've just put that dart in just to give a bit of shape over there. And of course, this is too small of a piece to really stretch out. So just iron that down, make sure there's not a funny bubble there. And now I'm going to put the shoulders together. This process I'm sure you've seen already. But at the end of the day, we flip that out. Now, I never have a straight shoulder because no one's shoulders are straight. This chap, he gyms a lot. So like up here, it's quite big and then kind of tapers down to the, closer to the arm. So you'll see it's very subtle, but if you look at a straight thing next door to that, you can see that's exactly how it is. Quite pulled up here and then tapering down towards the shoulder. So that's exactly how we're doing it for him. And at the end of the day, I'm just going to pin this up. Right side's facing. And from there, I'm going to lay this out reasonably flat. And then roll slash fold the bottom. Bring this piece of the yoke up here. And I'll just stitch that at 2 centimeters seam allowance. So I don't think I'll keep you around for the rest of that. I'll just head over to the sewing machine. I'm putting the buttonholes on the placket, and I'm doing here shoulder seams. Plackets are done with the buttonhole. See, I've put a little bar tack here by hand just for funsies. That's kind of my little signature. So this is going to chill for a little bit, these two sleeves. Now here, I've done the shoulders. So what I will do is to stitch around here so that it's not going to shift around too much. Just giving that like a stay stitch. And then I also need to decide what I'm doing with that front piece. So also here on the shoulder, I'll do the same. Well, I mean on the yoke. So now let's see, at the end of the day, if I remember correctly, the collar is 58 centimeters. This is 28, no, it's 56. 56. Yeah, because the neck is 50 centimeters, plus 2 centimeters ease, plus 3 centimeters overlap gives us 55. And this guy really does not like a tight collar, so it's 56. Now if we measure here, I'm just kind of measuring 1 centimeter seam allowance with my eyes. I'm going to come to 25, so it's 50, we're missing quite a bit. Now originally I thought, okay, we'll come down 3 centimeters. Let's do this with the ruler just to make it a little bit more accurate. And let's check it on here. A little bit plus 1 centimeter seam allowance. So actually, let's bring it in kind of like so. So there would actually be like that and back. Yeah, okay. Or whatever. So okay, if we cut that, yes, then our stitch line is the 1 centimeter seam allowance. We're looking for 28. 20, we were looking for 26. Let's give you 26 and a half. And the collar can be, is that right? Can collar be, no, it's better that it's actually, yeah, the collar can be a little bit shorter because, you know, this on the round can be tough to kind of open up. That gives me, you know, 26.5. Bit of a gamble. But I suppose if we have the seam allowance, now you see, actually, this one, what's going on here? Yes, sure, this is like the actual final. So we want 1 centimeter seam allowance on top of this, like so. If we measure that out, yeah, I mean, this even gets me to 27. Let's measure this again on the actual pattern. Let's see, 15. 27. Yeah, 27 times 2. No, I need 28 times 2. 56. My brain. This is like 27. So actually this should actually come down 1 more centimeter. Let's just check this. 1 centimeter seam allowance. I actually do need 28. So let me check this again. Yeah, could be 28. Okay. So let's come just 3/4 centimeters down here. Let's be as accurate as possible. And by the way, center front is here. So check center front. There we go. That actually looks perfectly. See, that's center front. No, that's center front. There we go. And let's check again. I need 28. I need it. It's going to be just short of 28. So I think that is actually going to be perfect. Okay. So I'm actually just going to iron this. There are 10,000 lines in one, just to confuse me. Let's stitch that first. So, here, I trace this again on the pattern. And yeah, this, maybe let me give that one more measure just for funsies. It needs to be at 28. Oh, why? Why am I being challenged emotionally? Because I'm not really measuring 1 centimeter seam allowance. It's a 1 centimeter seam allowance. Yeah, 28. Okay, that's going to be fine. So I traced it on both sides. Now this is getting a little bit too close to that first buttonhole, which I'm not 1000% happy about, but it is what it is. So for this chap, what I'll just do is put a note on his pattern. For the next shirt, I'm going to make the first buttonhole a little bit higher than usual. Usually the first buttonhole from the raw edge at 7 centimeters. For him, I'll probably do 5, just so that his next shirt and this shirt is not so incredibly different. At the moment, I think it's 4. So I'll do the next one at 5. No one will notice. Then at least you won't be so shocked. Yeah. So if you look at that, you can see that actually the marks that I drew from the pattern are pretty accurate both sides. I just wanted to make sure of that. I'm going to pin this around. and cut it out. Nice and flat. Okay. I'll go around and stitch again, just to stay stitched there, so that I can notch into that without feeling too stressed. Now, when I put the shoulder seams together, I noticed that here, the shoulder, or the front portion and the yoke do not match exactly. So this is something you can always just go double check. It might just be your poor cutting or poor stitching or whatever, but as you see there on the pattern, indeed the front is just that quarter centimeter shorter than the yoke. So this kind of thing you can correct immediately on the pattern. Okay, so I'll go and do that front stay stitch around the neck. Obviously here, I'm going to just trim out this front portion. So it's there glush with the yoke. And now we're going to see what is the story with my sleeves, because we've done now some manipulation. We've really brought the armhole up by shortening this yoke, and we've made the front armhole shorter by putting that dot in there. So we can go like so, and just get more or less where is the middle. Okay, the middle is kind of just a smidgen behind the yoke over there. Now over here, I was trying to match over here on the seam allowance, not over here, where there's almost no manipulation. So what I'll do from here is use that as my temporary center. Let's see. Is this the right sleeve? Yep. This is the right sleeve. Yep. Got my notch on my sleeve. I'm going to put that on the center. So maybe 2 to 3 centimeters each side of that notch. There's no gather because it is a curve. Then from there, I am going to do a little bit of a gather. Because this is going to give us the movement we want. And often the sleeve itself will gather. You can see there, the sleeve is coming in this direction, shirt's going in that direction. If I force that seam allowance up to match, see there's already a gather. So it's a bit of a practice, this portion. Knowing how much gather is too much and how much gather is too little. Then here when we come to under the arm, here we don't need to gather. So this portion we will not be gathering. And usually these are shaped more or less in the same direction, in the same manner. So the seam allowance will just fall together perfectly. Now here, because of all these manipulations, you can see we are about 2 centimeters extra on the undersleeve, on the this under part of the sleeve here. So just going to note that in my mind. Carry on this side. Again, a little bit of a gather. So in an ideal world, these two will gather exactly the same. And we'll also get a 2 centimeters excess of the sleeve on the other side. Trying, especially here over this dot, to really match the seam allowance and not the edges of the pattern piece. Okay, and that does look more or less like 2 centimeters. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. So let's just measure this to, I'm going to make it 2.25. So when I put the final fitting together, I did notice that it was not fitting nicely. But because I'm such a cowboy, I just bang that in there, knowing that I'm going to come again and do the alteration. So I'm going to take out 2 there. I'm going to smooth this in more or less to the shoulder, to the elbow. Yep. Okay, and then I'll be stitching this at 1.5 seam allowance. I usually keep the sleeve on the bottom so the feeder dog can grab that gather. Here I'll just trim this down because I can see there where's my elbow. So when I lay this out flat, I'll just trim that down one time, after I've done the fell seam there. And obviously I'll do the other sleeve one time. So there we have sleeves joined with a fell seam there. I'll link to the video where I can explain that. So now, okay, collars and cuffs. Obviously I should have been doing this earlier, but now it's the time. You get that out of the way. So here I just want to trim this down. So that it's more like the pattern. And where possible, you really want to have new pens. Which one is it that's so if possible you want this transition from the shirt to the sleeve to be quite straight. You want to have a corner here because that obviously is going to be very difficult to turn around the fell seam. So I'm just going to do that also on the other sleeve, and then I'll join the side seam with the 2 centimeter seam allowance, trim the one down, fold it over, and again do a fell seam. So that is that. Now I was just yapping along without recording anything like an insane person. Nothing too exciting has happened. Side seams, done. Hem, done. I roll this 3/4 centimeter, 3/4 centimeter. Now I'm putting the collar and cuffs on, just making sure that the smaller cuff is on the right hand side, larger cuffs on the left hand side, and yeah, then I put these freshness guarantees under the arms, and it's going to sit. Here's the side seam, the arm. It's going to sit just underneath there. So really, you can just take the pattern, draw that out, and just double it on the fold so you get this. See the shape here, and stitch this once one machine foot seam allowance, 1/2 centimeter. Edges are cut with a zigzag so it doesn't frame. And here I'm just going to zigzag over the seam allowance so that also won't frame. And then I'll put all of that together. Collar I'm still working on because I need to get it perfect. And then I'll obviously join the collar one time. So there you have it. You've got white collar and cuffs. You've got this just under the arms, just to help with the sweat stains. See that stitch in the ditch there. And that's that. Fashion baby.